When Pharaoh released the Israelites, instead of preparing and planning for the logistics of their journey, God asked them to first observe the Passover. Now they had crossed the Jordan and were ready to go to battle to take over the land of Canaan. But God surprised them again by asking that all the male children be circumcised, even though it will weaken the men for battle. God wanted to teach them and us that spiritual things come before physical concerns. Maranatha Study TV presents Lesson 7 of the 4th quarter, titled Ultimate Loyalty, Worship in a War Zone, with Pastor N.C. Bright. The key text is taken from the book of Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. It reads, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Sunday, Covenant First. Before the first Passover in Egypt, all Israelite males had to be circumcised to partake. This act was a sign that they belonged to God's covenant people. However, when Israel rebelled at Kadesh, refused to enter Canaan as God had commanded, their disobedience symbolized a broken covenant relationship. From that time, God suspended the rite of circumcision in the wilderness as a visible sign of his displeasure and as a reminder that their covenantal bond with him had been interrupted. During the 40 years of wandering, the new generation born in the wilderness grew up uncircumcised. Yet God did not speak against this. His silence was not approval, rather he was waiting for the rebellious generation to die off completely. God was done with that generation because he saw in them a spirit of unbelief and rebellion, a spirit that will never truly accept him as their God. When the Israelites finally crossed the Jordan River, God commanded Joshua to circumcise all the males born during the wilderness journey. This command came at a time when Israel was supposed to be preparing for war, and it seemed unwise to perform such a ceremony that will render the men weak and vulnerable for several days, especially when surrounded by enemies. But Israel understood that their covenant relationship with God was more important than battle readiness. This story teaches us about priorities in the Christian life. Similarly, Christians today must constantly renew their relationship with Christ before going after the goals and battles in life. Jesus expressed the same truth when he said, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." Monday, Passover. After renewing the covenant through circumcision, God led Israel to another important step before conquering Canaan, and that is the celebration of the Passover. The first Passover took place in Egypt. It was a symbol of freedom from slavery and protection from death. The second Passover, celebrated in Canaan, was very special. It showed that God had kept his promise. The Israelites were no longer slaves or wanderers. They were now ready to enter the promised land. Jesus gave the Passover a new meaning. During the Last Supper, he replaced the lamb with bread and the blood with wine. The bread represented his body and the wine represented his blood, both given for our salvation. Some people today ignore this sacred practice, also called the Holy Communion. Jesus made it clear how important it is when he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Tuesday, altars of renewal. After the renewal of the covenant through circumcision and the celebration of the Passover, Israel was now fully restored in their relationship with God. The next step was to renew their commitment through worship. When the Israelites entered Canaan, Joshua built an altar to the Lord on Mount Ebal. The altar on Mount Ebal also pointed forward to Jesus Christ. Today, we no longer build stone altars, but we can still create spiritual altars. Wednesday, written on stones. After Joshua built an altar on Mount Ebal, just as God had commanded in Deuteronomy chapter 27 verses 5 through 7, he set up a large stones, plastered them with lime, and wrote the law on them. The text included the 10 commandments, other statutes, blessings, and curses God had given. The law was then read aloud to all the people. Some stood on Mount Gerizim to hear the blessings, while others stood on Mount Ebal to hear the curses. This public reading reminded the Israelites that obedience to God brings blessings and disobedience brings consequences. Just as Israel renewed their covenant, we too are called to renew our relationship with God. The altar on Mount Ebal and the stones with the law point forward to Jesus. The altar symbolized forgiveness through sacrifice, and the law guided Israel's behavior. By following these practices, we can continually renew our commitment to God, just as the Israelites did. Thursday, longing for His presence. After Israel had conquered much of Canaan, the land was being divided among the tribes. By this time, the two largest tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh had received their portions. However, 7 smaller tribes had not received their inheritance. Before the final atonement was completed, Joshua called the entire congregation to assemble at Shiloh for a very important act, the raising of the Tabernacle, the center of Israel's worship. This we can find in Joshua chapter 18 verse 1. This interruption of the land distribution shows us that for Israel, worship and the presence of God were more important than land possessions. The erection of the sanctuary made it clear that the blessings of God and His abiding presence was the real foundation of the nation. Without God's presence, the possession of the land would have been meaningless. The tabernacle served as a unifying point where all Israelites could come together in worship and obedience. Revelation chapter 21 verse 3 explains that our ultimate hope is not just earthly victory, but eternal fellowship with God, when He will dwell with His people forever. Friday, further thought. It had not been many weeks since Moses gave the whole book of Deuteronomy in discourses to the people. Now yet, Joshua read the law again, not alone the men of Israel, but all the women and the little ones, listening to the reading of the law, for it was important that they also should know and do their duty. Every chapter and every verse of the Bible is a communication from God to men. We should bind its precepts and signs upon our hands and as frontlets between our eyes. If studied and obeyed, it will lead God's people as the Israelites were led by the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Patriarch and Prophet, page 500. If you want this gospel message to reach more people, please hit the subscribe button, like and share this video. Doing so will help YouTube recommend it to more viewers. The comment section is open for your reaction. Thank you for studying this lesson with us. Goodbye and remain blessed. Until we meet again next week. Maranatha.